Welcome to episode 24 of Agencyphonics. We're here not live today, but we will be putting this up very, very shortly. I'm delighted today to welcome Nathan Lomax from Quickfire Digital to come and join me. And Nathan has been a massive source of inspiration to me recently, just watching him work and getting the feedback that I've had from other agency owners that I know about the way that he is has just been really, really inspiring. And we'll get straight into that today because unlike the previous episodes where I've been diving back into people's past journeys, I really want to get to talk to Nathan today in a lot more detail about his approach to building the networks and the connections that he does so brilliantly. And I guess it all kind of starts for me, this area, Nathan, so welcome, Nathan, first of all.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So in our book, Agencynomics, which obviously Agencyphonics is based on, I wrote in there that, without leads, there are no sales. And without sales, there's no people. And without people, there's no services, there's no profit, there's no business, there's no agency. And so for me, leads are the most important thing. And when you look at the lead generation surveys that we've run at Cactus, the UK one and the global one, time and time again, we always see the number one way that new business comes in, and this is outside of existing clients, it comes in because of people's personal networks and maybe some of the periphery areas like speaking or networking at industry events and things like that. So, but networking is key. And when I had my agency, and we grew pretty quickly, right? We were Deloitte Tech Fast 50, a European Fast 500. I always tell people that I only had one KPI, and that KPI was how many people could I meet, new people each month. Now, I think my thinking has probably matured in the last 10 years around that strategy. But back then, I knew that if I met 50 people a month, I would probably find 3 out of those 50 who needed something right now, and I would probably win one of those 3. And that would typically lead me to win something like around £200,000 a month of new business. At that particular time, I was probably a £3-4 million agency, and so that was the level of sales that I needed. So those numbers could have jumped up accordingly. And so when I sold the business and I started becoming an advisor, I went out, I did lots of talks. This is why I'm so delighted you're here today. And lots of talks. And I would tell everyone that story about 50 people a month. If I meet 50 new people a month, I'd find 200,000. And then the rest of the business would just work because, if you've got the leads coming in, you've got the sales, you can pay the wages, there's less stress in the business. The only stress that really comes when you miss a sales target and you've got lots of wages to pay, right? If you have a recruited team. And so, but people would laugh at me, and I would go to dinners, Nathan, and they would go to me, I can't meet 50 people a month. That's impossible. And I would try and explain that it's only a couple of phone calls a day in 22 working days in a month, and that's 44. So it can't be that hard. And then you came along, and then I've watched you rip up my 50 a month and just increase that even more. But I guess so. What I want to get to right now is, can you share with us, 10 years later after I've sold my business, what your approach is right now to building your network, and how do you, and what have you learned from the whole experience?
Sure. So for me, it started with ever since I started the agency, I've always looked to surround myself with good people, and I would always be having meaningful conversations. And yes, we did start at around 50. 50 to me was easy because I had 2 other business partners, and so they could focus on the day-to-day running, and I could focus on just developing and nurturing those relationships. So it all started there. Obviously, COVID comes along and the rule book goes out the window, and I'm panicking. I'm thinking, crumbs, what do I do? And so the first thing I thought is, obviously with the Agencynomics community, it's a new platform. We need to get in first because not many people are messaging each other. So I sent a message to every single member. There's like 600 odd members. And then we started having conversations.
You went into our community and you literally messaged every single person.
Oh, you'll remember this. I got blocked.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, blocked. You did. They thought you were some kind of
community. They thought I was a spammer. So I did exactly the same on LinkedIn, and I've done the same in other networks. And the point is is that I ended up having a simple model, which was 30-minute calls, and I would do 20 a day. So there was 20 a day, which would give me 100 a week, which would give me 400 a month. Now, I've always been a creature of excess. And so I've always kind of 50. I thought, oh, if you could do 50, I'll do 400. And the main thing of that wasn't in the volume. It was in the bid afterwards. So the special sauce, as I always tell people, was in the 5 intros off the back, because you have to build reciprocity. It's no good. We have a lovely conversation for half an hour, but then there's no hook to get people onto the next call or to stay memorable. And the sole purpose of those calls is to stay front and center. So if we just have a nice conversation, you then follow up them like, oh, I remember that Nathan guy. Yeah, he seemed all right. And life's taken over and the business taken over and you're totally forgotten about. So how can you remain so sticky that people are like, I can't forget about him. I literally just can't. Yeah. So how do you remain front and center? You make introductions. So actually the source was, as I built the black book of agencies and contacts, I was then able to open it. And there's so many agencies I came across, very insulated, very kind of introverted, wouldn't share. And I was like, that's a load of garbage. Let's share all the knowledge we've got. Let's share all the contacts we've got, and let's help people. So
let's break it down a little bit. So first of all, you use the word meaningful conversation. And when I started the intro, I talked about, for me, I was meeting new people, people that I hadn't met before. And I think one of the mistakes that when I look back now was, I read a great book by a guy called David Burkus called A Friend of a Friend, and he highlighted the value. There's more value often in the people we already know. And I guess I was always trying to look too far forward and not look back. But I love the term meaningful conversation. What does a meaningful conversation mean to you?
So to me, it's 26 minutes talking about them and 4 minutes talking about me. So every single conversation I have, without fail, someone says to me, Nathan, we've got 3 minutes left and you've not even spoken to me about your business. What do you do? And I was like, well, that's fine. I can always have another call with you and tell you about that. But actually, I have to make every conversation. If you say to me, oh, I had a really meaningful conversation, that's because Spencer Polk spoke for the whole thing. And that's what people say to me. It's like, I felt that was really meaningful because I spoke for 28 minutes of the 30. So top tip there was let them speak and speak and speak. And then you speak for last. Yeah.
I'm going to validate that. So that, why I love that, sorry to interrupt, but it just, so there was a great book I read once, and it said, to be interesting, you have to be interested. And once I read that, I went away and I actually did a very similar thing to your exercise where I wouldn't tell people what I did. And eventually at the end but whenever I meet people about you, other agency owners that have spoken to you, they always say, what an interesting guy you are and what a great conversation it was. Even though it sounds like you're not even speaking, they're doing all the talking.
So I
think that's fantastic to hear.
I have 4 questions. I give it some structure and I say to them at the start, I mean, you're all going to learn this method now, so please keep having the conversations. But essentially, I will
they're going to see through you now.
Intro, and then I do 4 conversations. The first is, what's their proposition? So I can understand when I'm getting leads in, I know who best to send it to. I then ask them about target sectors, so where they're really specialists. I then say, if you could choose one client in the world, who would you choose? And the reason I do that is because you just never know who you're talking to. And I go, oh, that's so weird. Speaking to the head of marketing at Walt Disney. Great. You've got to speak to my mate over here that really wants to work with Disney. Great. And the final one is looking at agency partners. So I always say, who plays nicely in the sandpit? So essentially, if I was to introduce you to a web dev company, would you play nicely or would you not be able to refer? No, I wouldn't. Okay, well, let me find you a different agency. What type of agency do you like to work with? We love working with copywriters. Great. Let's introduce you to all the copywriters I've got. There's 20 on file. Here we go. So that's the model. And then I would make the intros, 5 intros, always 5. Don't know why, creature of excess. And then I finally get a chance to talk about me. But by that time, they're like, Christ, I thought we were just going to come on and have a standard conversation. You've given me all this value. I now need to learn about you. And then because the call cuts short, because it's only 30 minutes and I'm back to back, so I've always got to go at the half hour and then straight on to the next one. You're always leaving them with a little bit wanting more.
Yeah, and I want to make it really clear as well when you talk, because I think it is important to know that you are an incredibly authentic person. So although you're talking about your process that you do, it's not because you're gaming anything here. You know, you genuinely want to help people. I know that about you, and you're genuinely trying to, you know, and you're doing that to blow people away. But also it makes, as you rightly said, the psychology of it is then they feel like they want to help you out back. But I mean, but you're not doing it because you're expecting anything back, are you?
Not at all. That's the main thing to take from it. While I'm being really crude here and teaching about the process, essentially the main thing for me, the thing I get from it is massive learning. Because when I started this game, I'm always the youngest in the room. And I always felt that little bit of, I don't know if it's insecurity or what, but something where I was like, crumbs, I feel like I need to be on that level. So by me being able to learn from them and hear their story, hear how they present their proposition, hear about how they define their kind of target sectors, that's all great learnings for me that I can take Scribblings down on.
Yeah, it's great. And so just so breaking things down as well, you've also then talked about agency partnerships, and I talked originally about about the importance of networking and speaking, and we'll come on to that in a minute, because I think you do the speaking through the podcast, and you've got some great stories to share around tenacity and that side of things. But the agency partners, which also, even with the biggest agencies, the biggest network agencies, they get business from within their networks. And at an independent level, we all have to work collaboratively as frenemies, let's call it. And there are a lot of sectors out there where competition is quite difficult to work with. And I think I would say, actually, in the consulting world that I'm now in, it's very, very competitive. The competitors don't work well with each other. But when I had my agency, all of my competitors were almost became my best friends, and we were all because there's so much crossover. Actually, as you rightly said, that when you said, what sectors are you in, what services do you do, what size are you at, what geography are you in, there's just such a massive area. But other agencies always appears in the top 10, 12 ways that agencies win 80% of their leads. So you're almost combining the two there. You're being quite smart. You're using the volume of connections that you make, but you're also bringing other agencies in. What percentage of the conversations you have today are other agencies, maybe, versus other kind of business people?
75%, maybe 80%.
Are agencies.
Yeah, they're agencies.
Yeah, and I think, actually, as you get larger, I think they might swap the other way. I think, actually, as you get bigger, you'll probably find it ages around.
Yeah, but we're already finding that, right? Initially, it was all agencies, and then we're slowly weaning off and moving towards marketing managers, etc., and head of whatever. Yeah. But yeah, essentially, it all started from agency owners. And the big thing was then, how can we offer as much value in 30 minutes? And then how can we leave something sticky that gets us on another call? Because the easy part is the first call. The hardest part is the second and third call, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But that's why we set up the cohorts, and everything else is how do I smartly, because again, if that takes, just think about 400 intros times 5 times 400 calls, that's like 2,000 emails I have to send a month of introductions. That's massive amount of time. So then let's talk
about that as well. So there was a part of my journey where I actually had to go for a pitch to a very, very famous music label. And I turned up at the pitch, and I turned to a sort of pre-pitch meeting, and I said, who else are we pitching against? And they were trying not to tell me. And then they made a throwaway comment and said, well, we tell you who won't be here. X agency won't be here because apparently £200,000 is not enough money for them to get out of bed, which is, them sort of being a little bit frustrated about that big agency turning them down, rejecting them. But then I realized at that point that actually there are other agencies out there that don't work with certain budgets below certain levels. So I wrote a letter to the top 100 agencies, and I said to them, hey, if you think £200,000 is not a lot of money, could you do me a favor and refer me back those leads? And actually, I got some amazing replies. I mean, I got back the guy who, one of the partners in AKQA in the States, he wrote back. And anyway, on the back of that, Nathan, I became friends with about 18 other agency owners. And I started to create a dinner in London with the 18 of us. And over the years, the digital agency, we call it Digital Agency Founders Dinners, it grew to about 120 agencies. And I had, and actually some of my best friends today, in my, now I post agency, are some of the people that came to those dinners. And one of the things that surprised me about you, which I also love about you, is that you've taken a very similar route. Yeah. So tell us, what have you done then? You mentioned cohort, but also you've done these dinners as well. So not only have you got the connections, what have you done?
So I started the dinners 6 years ago. So when I started, I needed to be able to meet agencies, but I needed a reason to basically get them out of their working environment. So if I ever took them for coffee, it'd always be next to their office. Or if it was lunch, it was always a nice restaurant in town. Why would you want to go to a chain restaurant? You could do that with anyone. So it had to be a really nice restaurant.
Well, you don't take them to Nando's?
I never take them to Nando's. Always second and third date is Nando's. First date is always on my special.
Okay.
So essentially the dinners came off the back of, there was just no collaboration. I'm a huge advocate of agencies in East Anglia. It really does my head in when people say, oh, we can't, you work with someone because they're not in London. What a load of rubbish. That's bonkers. There's so much talent up here. So I just said, no, we're going to build this community and we're going to make sure that East Anglia is seen as a hub of agencies and a great place for people to work. And so we started inviting people. The first agency dinner, I think, was 12. Then it went to 24, then 36. I ran an agency dinner in London last year. We had 75 people.
Wow.
And essentially, I just built and built and built and built, and we continue to build. And it's a great chance. I always sponsor the bar bill. There's nothing worse than going to a party and you've got to pay for the drinks. That really pisses me off. So essentially, if I'm hosting, I love doing dinner parties, all that good stuff. If I'm hosting, the drinks are on me. We'll have a great time. We'll all share. We'll all collaborate. If people come with an agenda, I've got no time for it. Like, not welcome. People should come. People be open, honest. You always get one or two that try and like chuck business cards around. You're like, this is not what it's for. Yeah. We're not here to be winning business. We're here to be building meaningful relationships and saying, actually, oh, you do web and I do web and you don't touch anything under 30K and we do. Let's chat and I'll send you a 10% commission and we can work really nicely together. Bingo.
Great. And so you mentioned East Anglia, and obviously you guys are based in Norwich, you know, in the kind of the Midlands, the East Midlands part of the UK. And actually out of all of the regions, I think the Midlands generally is probably the most disparate in terms of, you know, it's very well spread out. Like if I've ever tried to host dinners in the Midlands, everyone has to travel for hours to get to one place. Yeah. But actually you are right. I think Norwich is this incredible creative and technical hub, even though it is, you know, probably closer to Holland than it is to London. That's my joke, sorry. But you know, and what is amazing is that you're giving me these numbers of these connections that you're making, and even before COVID, you know, you still were doing this, yet you know, you're not even that centrally based. So I think you're a really good example as well to people who are more regional, who aren't necessarily based in the centre of London or, you know, or Manchester, that actually there is, you know, there are ways if you are based in a remote area that you still could build good networks and get out there. Has COVID really helped that change? Because you must be jumping on that train a lot beforehand.
So COVID is, we talked a little bit before about moving from agency owners to marketing managers. Yes. So I set up exactly the same concept for marketing managers. Well, like, let's celebrate all that's good about marketing managers. Let's get them all in a room together. Amazing. Let's get 15 marketing managers. Let's talk about wins and challenges, and I'll chair it. And that was going incredibly well. COVID hit, got knocked on the head. Great shame. It will continue when it's kind of passed. Yeah. Essentially, the main thing is that I've always gone to them. So I did do one in London because actually I've got 70 odd agencies we work with closely in London. Let's go and run one there. Let's not inconvenience them. That thing, no one's going to travel from London to Norwich. That's an arse. Let's just do it in London. But the Norwich one, consistently, always same day of the year. We get it in the diary 6 months early, 30 or 40 people, brilliant. COVID has obviously stopped all of that. So what I've moved to is online Zooms. So 4 cohorts every Thursday, 9 till 10 to 15 agencies all together, chatting about wins, challenges, Chatham House rules. Been brilliant.
Amazing. I love that. And so where do you see the future of all of that going now for you in terms of, like, you know, because obviously as you meet more people, you're going to create a bigger network. And I mean, I know that, see, I look on LinkedIn and I'm connecting on a regular basis to people. I had one this week. It was actually quite comical. A guy said, oh, someone had written a lovely post saying thank you to me and a few others for selflessly helping them or something, you know, gratitude public list, which was very nice. And one of the other people sent me a message and said, oh, hi, I saw you were mentioned. You must be quite an interesting guy. Let's connect. And I said, look, I only connect to people that I've met or spoken to in real life, because that's my personal choice, the way I do it. And he came back with an automatic reply saying, I'm sorry, I'm too busy to meet anybody or speak to anyone right now. And I was like, hang on a minute. Like, how am I supposed to have a meaningful connection with you in my network if I don't know you, I've never spoken to you? And So I've always worked that way, Nathan. And I'm about 4,000 people in my network. And I find that really hard to manage. Like I find that 4,000 people to have meaningful connections with that many, isn't easy at all. It probably is too many still, even at 4,000. So with you though, if you're meeting all these people and they're accumulating and you're actually building meaningful connections, some point it feels like you're going to start struggling, or have you got to create new systems to manage that better?
So what I do need is a CRM, because I hate systems and process. So I always just use my head. So if someone says to me, name me 5 agencies, I'll just go bam, 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 as I did this morning in a walk and talk with someone. Really important that whenever you're hosting something, you just make them feel like they're the only person in the room, right? And if you continue to do that, it doesn't matter if there's 5,000 people in a room, you can still do it. So I'm very confident that the events will go back to as they were once we're good to go. I think I'll have to change slightly, because what I find now is I'm getting people coming to me. I actually had someone, I said, okay, what's the objective of today's call? And the first thing they said is, I just want access to your black book. And that really hurt, because I was like, actually, like I will always give and I will always pay it forwards. And I'm a massive believer in karma. But at the same time, I like to think that people go into it on an even keel, not just to take and not give.
Well, I think what's interesting about that person is at least they were honest about it. Because I think one of the things that and actually, do you know what? This wasn't something I was planning to talk to you about today, but I would love to talk to you about this subject, because I know that you'll have empathy with me on it, because I think anyone that goes through building big networks, you start to notice. Did you ever read Adam Grant's book, Givers, Takers, Matchers, Fakers?
Another book I've got on the shelf. I need to read it.
Honestly, you got to read that book, because now you have the network, you'll get it, right? So there's no question that when you read the book scientifically or mathematically, or however he worked it out, he's a professor of Wharton University in the States, and they worked out that the most successful people in the world are givers, people who help others unconditionally. And then they looked at the least successful of the most successful. And guess what? They were also givers. So it doesn't matter what level of success you have, the majority of you are going to be people who give. And then you get the people who are the matchers. So they're like, well, if you give me 5, I'll give you 5. If you help me, I'll help you. And so often, like if I think, ask someone, would you give me a LinkedIn review? Yeah, I'll do your LinkedIn review if you do me one back. And not that that's a negative, but sometimes it can be conditional, and then you get the people who sort of who are the givers, takers. So the people obviously take for you, the fakers. So I said, does anyone know any agencies in America? Because I'd love you to help maybe read my book and just give me if you like it, review it. Or could you recommend any agency owners in America? And a lot of people come back to me and say, yeah, no worries, Spencer, leave it with me, I'll get you some. But they never have no intention of doing it. They're just telling me that because they want me to think they're helping me. It's like a fake move that they are, but they're not.
With agency partnerships, actually, it's a bit like a game of chess. You have to make the first move, because otherwise, we could do loads of business together, it's going to be a great partnership. Well, okay, well, no one's prepared to do that first intro. So by doing those intros, it gives you that kind of look. I'll make the first move. I'll show goodwill. Now it's kind of over to you. If you want to be reciprocal, great. If you don't, then we'll kind of hold it.
Yeah, and I think your strategy is spot on. By the way, you have to give first, and that shows that you're a giver. And I think that's that's how it was. But my question I was going to ask you was, do you? My big sort of frustration is that there's a lot of people out there who, and I know that you're you are a very generous person, right? You're always very generous to us with the way you talk about us and you recommend us. And I know that when I speak to other people, they don't go, oh, I spoke to Nathan, oh God, he spent the whole time selling himself. Like, I know you're not that person, but you must have started to really notice now a percentage of people who don't get it. Like, they just it's all about what's in it for them. And they don't really, but they think they're givers. This is the thing, right? They think they're givers, but they're not. Like, every time I help people, the people who don't say thank you, who don't acknowledge you. And it's not a problem, because I don't care. I'm happy to help someone selflessly. But when they don't thank you and come back, and eventually you feel a little bit like, well, so what I'm trying to say to you is, it's like, how do you help people Like, because sometimes you must come across people you think, God, they're being really taken. I could really help them if they could just see what they were like.
You have to kiss a few frogs at the end. I haven't got it perfectly, but at the end of the day, I always find, like, if you just give, and then continue to give and continue to pay it forwards, whether it be in professionally or personally, it will come back in due course.
Yeah.
As you say, there is no forgiving for not saying thank you. I don't care who you are, what background you've had. If you don't say thank you, then I'm just not prepared to work together, because I just think it's the most basic level of respect. If you've made an intro, if you've sent a present, if you've done anything, just say thank you. That's all you can ask.
Yeah. And how do you, like, are you able, I mean, you sound like, and I guess this is the point I'm trying to get to, is your self-checking mechanism, you know, of making sure that you're not forgetting to say thank you, because, you know, people have helped me out in life, and life gets busy and you forget to say thank you. But you know, do you hold yourself to account to do this, you know?
Yeah, I think sometimes, don't get me wrong, there'll be times where I dare say I have forgotten someone, and I've followed up and I've been like, oh, crumbs, I now remember. Very rarely do I forget, though, because it's important that with things like, it's all about remembering where the opportunity came from. So this conversation wouldn't have happened without an introduction to you from Marcus however long ago. Marcus wouldn't have happened unless I reached out to him on Facebook and invited him for coffee. So actually, if we track all the state traces back, today I should thank Marcus to say I've had a great time on the podcast, and it wouldn't have happened without you, so thank you.
Yeah, and I remember inviting Marcus to one of my dinners for the first thing I think communications ever to him was to invite him to a dinner, one of the dinners, which is quite funny. So, and then you mentioned the black book, and now I love the concept of a black book. On my journey when I built my agency, I once had a phone call from someone. I'm going to name check him. His name's Tom Ball, and he said, Spencer, he said, I've got a list of my top 100 contacts. You're on it, and I'd love to have a cup of coffee and just catch up and see how things are going. And then when I turned up and met him, I think I was on page 10. He sort of went for his list of 100 contacts. It wasn't a black book. I was like, well, I'm not that important then, am I? I'm right at the end. And he went, how can I help you? And it was great. Very similar approach to you. What can I do? I was like, no one ever asked me that. I'm always the one asking other people, you know. And actually at the time, there were two things. He did those two things. It was brilliant. So you talked about CRM and everything, but what, you know, do you have, so out of the network contacts you've built now, have you got a list of the super connectors, of the people that are, you know, or not? Is there a way of, you know, have you got a black book?
It's too green, if you like. It's a real junior model. Essentially, it's just in my head. And there's some people that have stuck with me because of the conversations we've had, because the way they've said thank you, because the way they've just been really supportive on the call, or kind of mentioned me or tagged me in something. And therefore, they're the people that stick with me. So actually, no, there's probably 50 or 60 that I do retain. And all it does, when I'm finding out about people's specialisms, they say, oh, I do development, but I don't do any in .NET. Do you know .NET? And I just kind of go to the file of facts in my head and go, oh, .NET, yeah, there's 5 people, here we go. I think
it is important to be memorable with you and others, so that they are those people that are front of mind, because really the people that leave an impression with you, Nathan, are going to appear in that top 5 over and over again, right?
Of course they will. Now, there's definitely some people that are on that kind of blacklist, and I've got a top 20. Top 20 that at any point I will always think about them, and I'll always think of them as first port of call. So if I get an invitation to something, if I get an opportunity somewhere, I will always go to them.
Okay.
But realistically, I just you have to be front and center, and normally it's from people that have said thank you or followed up, or at least kind of paid it back.
Yeah, there was I'm going to talk about a tool here, and I'm going to not necessarily say it's the best one, right? Because there are lots of tools in the market, and actually, you know, we use HubSpot where we are, but I did use a product for a while called Contactually. Did you ever come across it?
No, I haven't seen it.
And weirdly, they've repositioned now as like a contact tool for estate agents or something like that. But what was great about it, Nathan, was it integrated into your Gmail and your LinkedIn. And so let's say, for example, you had 2,000 contacts. You could put the 50 people that are family into one bucket, and they had a little game on the app where you could throw them in. You could, I sound like I'm plugging the software now, but I'm really not, because it actually got really expensive. But I mean, it's worth post this. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes. Go check it out, see where it's at. But you could have these buckets, Nathan, where you could go, here's family, here's my top 100 connections. Here are the big agencies, here are the small agencies, here, whatever. You could segment everybody, and then you could set rules up by bucket. So you could say, I want to speak to these people every 2 weeks. Or you could have one saying, people that come to my dinners, you know, I want to speak to these people every 4 weeks. And it was really great way. And then if it saw your email had spoken to them, it then ticked it off that you'd spoken to them. So then it would go, hey, you haven't spoken to this person in 4 weeks on LinkedIn, Gmail, or phone. And that was really cool.
A really nice feature,
isn't it?
Where our model kind of breaks is actually it's far too dependent on me. So if I want to take time out or whatever, it's solely on me. So actually, we're always looking to continuously improve. And I think that's the next step for us is how do we create something that means our team can also have meaningful conversations, and it's not about Nathan building relationships.
Yeah, definitely time for a bit of CRM there, sir. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was you started your own podcast, and I think you're one of the things that's there's a joke at the moment, isn't there, about what the world needs is mind you, you're not even 30 yet, so what the world needs is another 40-year-old male starting up a podcast. But actually, what's been really impressive is that the quality and caliber of your guests have suddenly gone through the roof. And you shared with me the story recently about, Guy Kawasaki was coming on the show. I was like, how the hell did you get Guy Kawasaki coming on your show? And I've been talking for a while about the lost art of tenacity and whatever, but, can you share that story of how that came about?
Essentially, I believe in a model that people enjoy talking about themselves. And so I reached out to Guy when I first started, and I said, you know what, if you don't ask, you don't get in this life. There's no favors. As I come out of that kind of cotton wool bud of school and everything else, that essentially now you're in a big wide world, you've got to go and get it. It's not coming to you. And so I just thought, hi Guy, I really admire what you do. I've read a couple of your books. Would love to kind of catch up. He sent me the loveliest email back, and we just got chatting. And then what I did is every year, without fail, I would just drop him a note. Happy Christmas, Guy. I hope you and the family are safe and well. Because I knew that once I got in, and again, it sounds really crude. It wasn't as mechanical as this, but looking back, it's kind of how it was. I knew that at one time I would need to call on Guy, and I'd like to call on Guy to help. And so I just nurtured it along that process every year. How you doing? Hope you're well. And then sure enough, the podcast we started, we tapped on our local connections first. That was great. But it was getting stale because it was just like every other podcast. There was nothing that made it stand out. And I wanted to prove a point. I needed to show why listen to our podcast and not someone else's. Well, our podcast will show you that anything's possible, and all these barriers you keep putting up are just self-fulfilling, right? You're just doing it in your head. So why can't you have Guy Kawasaki in a podcast from Norwich? Well, there's no reason. So reach out to him. Guy, need a massive favor. This is what we're doing. You've inspired me on my journey. I'd love to get you on the show. Yeah, Nathan, great to hear from you. I'd love to have you on. Once I got Guy, that was the magic ticket. As soon as I have one, Jordan Harbinger. Jordan
Harbinger's a great scout.
Yeah,
he's like
on the show.
Probably one of my favourite podcasts.
The best thing is the name check, right? So then you go with had Guy Kawasaki, so it gives a bit of credibility. We'd love to have you on. Now he's on. Hi, Evan Carmichael, biggest entrepreneurship podcast in the world. On the YouTube channel. We'd love to get you on the show. We've had Guy and Jordan. Oh, if you've had them too, we'd love to. So next, if you're listening, Oprah Winfrey, you're next. I always have to
she listens to this show quite a lot because I'm always
someone will know Oprah. If you know Oprah, I would love to talk to her.
I'll tell you who, because actually you and I were speaking, because obviously I've been quite a big fan promoting Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley, and you were saying, oh, I can introduce you to Joe, and actually, just so you know, we're rewriting the new version of Agencynomics, and the conversation by Chat to Joe is obviously started that conversation off. So hopefully Rethink Press will be doing that for us if all goes well, and later on this year. But then actually one of the other guys who worked with Daniel then reached out as well, and then it's like you, Joe, and this other guy. And then, anyway, so I actually spoke to Daniel 2 mornings ago, and he's coming on the show in 2 weeks.
Brilliant.
So, and I've been quite strict. Like, I'm trying to keep this show very agency centric, and that's the focus. Is having agency owners on, or people who are doing key roles in agencies and shared learnings. And it is quite niche, but I think Daniel's books, Keep Us Influenced and Oversubscribed, have got so much relevance to agencies. I think it's really great. But I'm probably at the same stage as you, where I'm starting to think now, need to get a few more bigger names on. So I'll definitely be coming to you for a few more tips. So that's good. So we've covered off our meaningful conversations and they're talking about the volume of connections. Can I just ask one last question on that subject though?
Yeah.
How have you become smarter at managing? Like, I know you sounds like you had a process, but how do you, because there's obviously a volume there. I mean, how do you manage your diary? That's probably a question a lot of agency owners want to know. And how do you fit these things in?
So I don't necessarily manage it perfectly. Originally, I would just block them day to day. A white space would be like the devil for me. So I'd always have to have a red slot, 30 minutes onto 30, onto 30, 10, 12 hours a day, no problem. Remember, I don't have kids. I don't have responsibilities. All of a sudden, it becomes easier. I'm not saying that everyone can do that. But then actually, I started to think about ways I could do it. Could I do a 4 ball of golf in the morning and get 4 of them at once? And all of a sudden, I've saved 2 hours and I've done something I enjoy. Then I hired a PA. And all of a sudden, she started to help manage the diary. And then we would book stuff in weeks in advance. We get some people that actually, they don't want to wait till October. So now it's like, okay, yeah, I can have a slot. How's October looking? Oh, well, okay, if he's that busy, I don't really want to chat. Well, fine, okay, I can't help. But yeah, most importantly, I just have diary slots, always 30 minutes. No one has more than 30 minutes unless there's a client. Because otherwise, it can just run and
30 minutes, that's great.
30 minutes, yeah, has to be 30 minutes.
Yeah, and I think actually, weirdly, when I was in your shoes, I think every call was an hour and a quarter, and so I think that is very easy to lose time and make calls too long. But 30 minutes, you probably get more out of them because they're probably more focused because of the agenda that you have as well.
Yeah.
And you can always have a follow-up call. I think you said to me once.
If it was a great call and we both enjoy it, then we'll jump on another call. We'll have another 30 minutes. The final thing on that is that I always play a lot of sports, so I call it the dartboard. Essentially, the objective for any kind of meaningful conversation is to get in that person's red circle. If you can get in the red circle, that's where all the opportunities come. Look at any network as well. If you can engage and be part of a network, Agencynomics being one of them, if you can get in that red circle, the opportunities will come to you. But it's all those people that join and do nothing with it. And then they're like, oh, we didn't get any leads. Well, why would you get leads? You didn't put anything into it. You're not going to suddenly get loads out of it.
Yeah. And I think we spoke just before this started today about the long game of agencies as well. And when I said at the beginning, when I used to meet the 50 new people, not meaningful, and then I used to find the three of those would have some serendipitous opportunity at the time, one would convert. That leaves 47 people, right? And the 47 people that I'd met often would come to the drinks events, the dinners. They would come to thought leadership events that we did. They were in our marketing. They may be invited to other events that we did, parties in the office. I don't think other different celebrations. And in many cases, and actually it happened to this morning on a phone call I did, where someone I met 5 years ago, and I've had some touch points through the 5 years, suddenly asked about working with us. And so a lot of those people that you're having conversations with today, it may be 6 or 7 years down the line, but a lot of people in agency leadership teams, they haven't got the patience for that. They want results now. And you have to be patient, don't you, Nathan?
I think if I'm really honest, the biggest takeaway from all of this is that if you go in expecting the lead, it doesn't happen. So if you go in kind of chasing the sale or thinking, oh, okay, I'll speak to this agency and we're going to do loads of business, it doesn't happen. But if you change that mindset and go in with, how can I solve their problem? I think it might have been you or Marcus that was telling me about that. How can I solve that problem that keeps you up at night? If I can do that.
I taught Marcus it. He taught you it.
There we are. So yeah, essentially, if you can do that, then you're laughing.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's the reciprocity is at its best actually when you meet someone and you say, "What's your biggest challenge right now?" And because actually, it doesn't matter whether it's something you do or not, right? If you can help someone in some way, they'll want to help you out back. So
the last thing on introductions is, of course, it's a double win, right? Because the person you're introducing is grateful, but the person that's being introduced is also grateful. So you're kind of helping two people at once.
Yeah, it's very true. And then we had an episode where we had Phil Jones on, a previous episode, which was, I don't know if you listened to it, but you should definitely listen to it, because Phil Jones is like the grandfather to both of us. Okay. Right. So he did what I've done and now what you're doing, back in the 80s. And he back then, you know, the thing that was important for him was finding the interest groups. So rather than, yeah, it was like, you know, which people like football, like playing five-a-side. In fact, he had, you know, female and male football teams back then as well. And he would bring everyone together playing football in marketing agencies, and they all became really good friends because they all had something in common. Yeah. And so you know, we talked at the beginning, let's not go into too much detail about the success of Norwich this season, but you guys being based in Norwich, you know, you have tried a bit around that to, you know, use the box to find people, because obviously you're passionate about football, right? And
Yeah,
so,
exactly,
you know, when you meet other people who share the interests with you, who are Norwich fans,
yeah.
you know, there's a few of them out there.
Just one or two of us, but no, it's a really important kind of method, and that's finding common ground as quickly as possible. That might be football, cricket, hockey, whatever it is, and then essentially just getting people together, going together, and maybe just not talking about work, because too often we spend our time talking about work all the time. So actually, to understand someone on a personal level, essentially, we're not going to do business with people we don't like, people we don't respect, people we don't enjoy spending time with, and therefore getting to understand them personally as well as professionally is so important. So saying, yeah, let's go for a beer, let's have dinner together, let's get a group of us. Even in Agencynomics, you look at the subcommittees we created. Okay, who in here likes cooking? Let's have a group. I think that's one of the most active subcommittees, right? Let's all post our dinner. Like, let's all post a dinner, because we all love cooking. We all love telling each other different recipes. Perfect. We've got a golf day coming up because a load of us like golf. There's a really nice chap, you tagged me in his post this morning. I'm going to play golf with him with a few other agency owners. There's so much common ground with agency owners. That's one of the nicest things about having the conversations, is you just feel like you're not alone. You realise that actually so many people have got the same problem. So many people have been there, seen it, and got the t-shirt. So there's a model, the plus equals minus model. I think it was from Ryan Holiday or something. But essentially, there's a great chance to surround yourself with bigger agencies, to talk to peers, and then also to find some people a bit earlier on in the journey to be able to pay it back, to say, you know what, I learned something over here, and I'm going to teach you it over here, because that will help you get to where I am while I'm trying to get to where they are.
Yeah, do you know, I'm going to do a bit of a plug here actually for because that person that you mentioned who just joined the community was actually a recommendation in from one of my closest friends who runs something called For Business. Have you ever come across it?
Yeah, the golf network.
Yeah, exactly, the golf networking. So Sean's a guy I kind of grew up with who runs it, and you know, he has that network around golf. So if you love golf, you go into there, and I mean, he tells me these stories of millions of pounds worth of business that's created from people that just all share a love of golf. And I think we all know that story about being on the golf course. Where else do you get to spend 3-4 hours with somebody? And actually, I think we've started to do, and you just mentioned walk and talks.
Yeah.
And I think that's another good example with walk and talks, or we did some mindfulness walks before lockdown, which got people together for long periods of time, you know, with common interests like the countryside, like going out for walks. I think all of that area is so important to try and find common interests. You know, as you said, I think, is it something like if you go to negotiate with someone that you have some, and before you negotiate, you find something in common with them. I think this is a Cialdini persuasion study. You've got a 90% chance of a successful outcome, you know? So some really great tips in there as well. So Nathan, what's next? What's next for you on your journey? So you've built this great network up. The business is getting real momentum.
Yeah, the business has been, I've been so chuffed actually. And you, John, during lockdown, of course, like any agency owner, right? We panicked, we thought what's going to happen. We've had some really strong months. The team have really dug in. We've started to reap the rewards of having all these conversations and building all these partnerships. And now for us, it's as we get through that first million, as we go on towards our next, well, kind of 2 million being the next target, we now need to start thinking about working a bit smarter. So for me, it's how can I step back a little bit from day-to-day operations. I'm far too hands-on at the moment. I am very bad at letting go. That's another thing that's been really good for us over this time, is when you're talking to other agencies, you can see traits and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not just a freak. Like, other people also struggle with that. So really hard to let go. So that's the plan for us. Let go, build the team, get the team up to the right level, make sure we've got the right heads in the right seats, and then just keep delivering great work. I think we'll adjust our proposition slightly. So at the moment, it's around digital transformation within e-commerce. We will continue to push that, but at the same time, we will just increase the kind of consultancy that we're doing as well. We're getting great traction there, doing some really good work. and it's really important we keep pushing that forwards.
That's great. And I love that you've started from a position of working hard at this, and then you're working smart. I think there's a lot of people who just try and work smart at the beginning, and it's a bit lazy. And, trying to work smart before you work hard is just pointless as far as I'm concerned. The philosophy and I've always had and I've seen work well is where you work hard at something, then you optimize. And then you can cut down. I think you're doing that. You've gone out, you've built loads of connections, you've cut down the amount of time you're spending with people, you're learning a process, how you do those calls. Yeah. And now you're starting to optimize around, you're seeing where the leads are coming from, I guess, from the networking, and that's helping everything optimize accordingly.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's the plan for us really, is to now get towards that 2 million and then on from there and towards exit in 4 or 5 years time.
Great. So, well, that's fantastic to hear. I've been, as I said, super impressed. I think what's been really great is your energy. I've seen it rub off on other people. I think for me, it's important that you share this story, because I think there's a lot of agencies out there who should just go and give it a try, right? We have I'm not going to name any names, but we have a mutual agency that we both know, who maybe they're a slightly more introverted agency, and the 3 directors have just started to do, inspired by you, by the way, because I've been telling them for years to do it, and then they go, well, Nathan does it, we're going to do it, but if you tell us to do it, Spencer, we're not going to do it. And they did 118 phone calls 2 months ago because the pipeline was empty. And within 4 weeks, the pipeline was 1.6 million in size. And I just was like, yeah, I'm not surprised. And, and they've just closed all those deals off now. So anyone out there listening struggling on sales,
it definitely works. And the thing with that agency is they're such a talented agency. It's like, well, why wouldn't you do it? If you can find that mechanism, then you're laughing. So it's great for them. And I encourage you all, okay, don't do 400. That's exhausting. It absolutely knackers you out. But at the same time, just do 50 or 100. Just get enough.
Start small and build it up, yeah.
The big thing is around consistency as well. So just keep it consistent. Don't just do 20 a day and then just drop it off. Do it consistently for a period of months. See what happens. Test it, measure it. If it works, do more. If it doesn't, do less. And we're always happy to chat. I'm sure you guys will, Spencer, if people want to know.
Do you track it as well, Nathan? Like you said about their build. How do you keep a record of how many, or do you not?
I have a spreadsheet.
You have a spreadsheet. Okay.
Yeah,
spreadsheets are great.
Yeah, I think you shared me the spreadsheet. So it was a spreadsheet we had a few years ago, and I think one of our first calls, you just said use this. So every conversation I have is all in there with all the coffees, etc. And then I can just look through and say, look, I've had 9 calls for that person. I think they're really nice, but there's nothing going either way here. We need to maybe drop that to 1 a quarter or 1 a half or yearly, as opposed to every single week.
Yeah, it's good. Listen, thank you for sharing all of that today. I mean, it's been a very sort of much more focused Agencyphonics talking about it, but I think, you've been a massive inspiration. You're clearly helping out a lot of agencies through this period as well by building all these connections. And I think it's really nice of you to come on here and share all of the things that you're doing and your approach, and hopefully you inspire a few of the listeners to go away and and give them the confidence coming out of, probably one of the worst downturns in history, right? Although for most of us agencies, it shouldn't be too bad, because we all have technology at the heart of what we do. And I think it's not maybe as bad for agencies as 2009 was.
I think so. And also I always say control the controllables, right? You can't control the pandemic. You can't control the recession. What you can control is the activity you put in. So just keep doing the activity, focus on this bit, and the rest will follow. I can promise that.
We'll end on that note. Fantastic advice. Thank you, Nathan, for your time, and good luck for the future with everything.
Thanks again.
All the best. So that concludes our episode. I hope you've enjoyed that. I've certainly, for me, it's a subject close to my heart, as most of you know, and I'm really glad that Nathan shared everything with us. I thank him for that. And stay tuned for the next episode coming very soon. All the best. Bye, everybody.